My Crow Speaks to the Darkness. A story written by D.L Schindler. I awoke in the darkest hour of the night, sweating and cold. I felt as though something had just left us there, or perhaps still remained. A cold fear crept along my clammy skin. I looked over to where my talking crow was asleep, nested on the pillows. Detective Winters was snoring in his own bed. The open window was watching me while I looked up. Then the feeling was gone. I laid back down. When I slept again, I dreamed of the woman I had left behind in my home. It seemed so long ago. I wondered if she was still there. Somehow, I knew she was. I suddenly couldn't stop thinking about her. I really didn't like her, yet my instincts told me to worry about her. So I did. As dawn crept light across the twisted landscape outside the hotel window, I thought of her. Then I got up and ate my sandwich out of the fridge and drank some water out of the sink. I left a piece of it for Corey and went to brush my teeth. Detective Winters woke up as his phone was ringing. He listened and said very little. I could tell he was talking to his boss. "Ready to go?" he asked me as he laid back down. "I am. Are you?" I nodded at his prostration. "Let's stay and eat," Corey suggested as he fed. We all shuffled out of the hotel room to the car, Corey flitting from place to place and finally gliding to the car boldly. 3 crows took the opportunity to scold him from the wire above. He avoided them and looked at me. He said, "You should know your old home, or sadness will prevail," Corey told me. "I know." I took him with me into the car, hugging him gently to me. "What is it?" Detective Winters asked me with consideration, looking in his rear-view mirror at me. "There is a woman I left behind in my home. I have started worrying about her." I told him the truth. "I thought you were homeless." He handed me his phone. "Are you?" I asked him. Sometimes I adopted Corey's mannerisms when dealing with people. Not intentionally. "Touché, Mr. Lord, touché." Detective Winters went ahead and lit a jacked-up-looking rollie, all bent and with bits of tobacco sticking out of it. He opened the car door a crack while we sat there. I dialed the number. "Isidore?" I said her name when she picked up. "Christ! Lord! I thought you were gone forever!" she exclaimed. She started saying a bunch of stuff about the house and bills before I said, "I don't care about the house. I called for you," I said. "I need you to come back. I can't do this on my own. I know you won't leave me. Why are you gone?" Isidore started crying into the phone. "Isidore, how can you say that? We barely know each other. I invited you in. I didn't think you would stay. That's why I left, because you wouldn't," I explained honestly. I had only just spent a few nights with her, and we barely had more than a conversation before that. Then she had just decided she was in love with me and moved in. Not that she had anything to move. She had arrived with her toothbrush and pajamas. I thought it was cute, until she stayed. "I know you." Isidore sounded strange. "Yeah, I know you too. It's not like that. What do you want from me?" I must have sounded different to her than I meant to, for she simply said, "Just your love." "I can't just love you," I claimed. I was lying. I fell in love with people all the time. I did actually care for her. I was just being very cowardly about it at the time. Then accept my love for you, she negotiated. Fine. Is that all? Are you okay? I asked. I am not okay. I literally need you. Her voice was very quiet when she said this. I believed her, even though I did not want to. I have to go. I have work to do. I will call you. I paused as Detective Winters made a gesture of walking fingers and a knock on a door. I hate charades. I will come see you later. Then I hung up as she said goodbye and told me she loved me. Let's go. She's fine, I shrugged and restored his phone to his hand. Her name's Isidore? Detective Winters chuckled. That's like calling a girl Charlie. It's kinda cute, I guess. She doesn't need a cute name, I promised him. He ignited the engine and drove us to the scene of murder. Beholding the darkness within the earth filled me with fear and dread. Detective Winters told me over and over that I was going with him into the darkness. I refused to go down there, panic sweeping me in strokes instead. I was suffocating on my own doubt of survival, anticipating such an adventure. Corey was left behind as he dragged me by handcuff to his wrist into the dizzy and pale threshold. Then, by mere candlelight, we went amid the cackling specters of the dim. I closed my eyes to see, knowing it was the way in such a place. I remembered the mirrored veins of the paths above this place. All of them followed the water, and it rode the top of the stones. Therefore, I knew my way, as surely as I knew the paths formed directly above. In the young forest, amid the ruined heath, without the sky, without my bird, without my sight, I was paralyzed by fear of the dark dwellers. There was only one way out, and that was forward. In my paralysis, I had no control over myself except to know I was fleeing in panic, unable to stop. I looked down to find the handcuff was free, and the light shone from the floor spinning. With his thumb broken to free his hand, Detective Winters was laying there examining the injury. We have to leave, I hissed in terror. I hunched down. You ruined my thumb, he snarled back. His eyes rolled, and he actually fainted where he lay. I took up the flashlight and used it to bathe his body in light. There I left him and continued to escape the place he had brought me. Upon the kill I stumbled, alone. There the chalk outline remained. 2 children. Looked like they were dragged and discarded in a heap. The extension cords all went to one junction and split into 3 lanterns that shone in that one room as day. I was in the heart of the labyrinth. I had escaped nothing. The handcuff hung freely, and I looked at its shiny surface. Reflected there, in the polish of the cuffs, I could see the shape of one of the dark dwellers. It was on the wall and ceiling behind me, watching me from the darkness. I turned and it skittered into a crack in the wall with lightning quickness, its many centipede legs making it look like the animation of a flipbook, its length rippling in the darkness. I staggered back in mortal mystery. My eyes were wide, and I choked on the breath I had exhaled, trying to scream in sheer terror. Then I closed my mouth on my tongue, knowing with reptile swiftness not to make a sound, for they were all around me. The ceilings and the corners of the floors and the corridors filled with their monstrous shape. They were more like spiders or something I cannot even describe. Their movements in the darkness were so quick it was as though they were one shape, and then the other as they flailed and flung themselves at blinking speeds through the shadows. Without the light, I would be torn apart as the two victims that were taken before we arrived. I could not breathe, knowing I would die in the darkness. One of them put its dark, spindly scythe of black chitin into the light for a split second, and I saw the urticating hairs bristling, ready to impale me with 1,000 needles just by touching me. I lifted what I thought was a rock to defend myself. I pulled it free from the edge of the corridor, from under some rags. As I held it up, I found a better grip. Shifting my fingers into its grooves, the creature scattered. I was breathing heavily, still gripped by terror. I had to escape back out of there, and I somehow took a step out of the light back the way I had come. Or so I thought. I turned and turned again, feeling my way along with my left hand on the wall. My right hand still held the object, which now felt light for a stone. My panic had subsided, and I had moved without thinking. I was lost in the darkness. I felt my way along. I kept thinking I could hear the creatures. Then up ahead I saw the light. In the middle of the light stood a policeman, gesturing for me. I stopped and watched. It came closer, the eyes horrible and empty of life. Then, as it escaped the light, I saw it was merely an illusion. Somehow, it could hide what it looked like, refusing to be seen in its entirety. The creature came for me, and then I screamed. It was a flash of scythe-like spider legs by the thousands, and its many horrible eyes, and its beak-like mandibles. It was coming for me out of the darkness, a silhouette against the lanterns beyond. I was screaming and curling away from it, about to be torn to pieces by it. Resounding gun blasts flashed brightly and lit up its awfulness. The bullets tore into it, black inker, splashing where its flesh was. Then it fell over, twitching and curling and steaming. It quickly dissolved into a puddle of nightmares. What in the hell was that? Detective Winters was shaking violently and still aiming his gun, even though he had emptied it. How should I know, Detective? This is your crime scene, I complained. I was shivering and sweating, and knew there were more. There are more of those things. My lord, are you alive? Corey called into the hole. It's your crow, Detective Winters sighed in awe. I know that. How did he get out of your car? I wondered distractedly. I left my window down, I think, Detective Winters realized, his own mind easily choosing to think of something else. You think, or you know, I demanded, severely stressed. I accepted the flashlight, and he removed my handcuff while I was holding it. I tried to hand it back, and he gestured for me to wait a second by holding up one finger. Jesus, I just think, okay? Sorry. Detective Winters reloaded his weapon and grimaced. It looked very difficult with his ruined thumb. My lord, are you alive? Corey asked a second time. That is when we all heard them. I heard them, and Detective Winters heard them, and Corey heard them. Their voices froze my blood. The damn things were speaking. The penultimate horror I felt was a sweeping and cold knowledge of them. That they could speak and had their own language was fearsome in its perversion. Nothing like that should exist, and to give it intelligence was the work of a mad creator. Their language challenged man's place in creation, putting something so blasphemous in place of the will of man. Such a horror could break my mind with every syllable that they uttered within human mouths. They did not only speak their chittering abomination, for some of them whispered plain English from the darkness as well. This is the home. This is the darkness. It belongs rightly. All the food, the flesh is food. This belongs to the flesh, the food. They spoke in a unified and horrifying whisper. My lord, you should come out of there. The folk of the shaded places will kill you for trespassing. Then they will eat you, Corey called to me from above. I got that, I shouted back, and the sound of my voice stirred the one nearest to us. Time to go. Detective Winters made me go first with the light. We made our move, and instantly it was as though the walls and ceiling had come alive. They were all around us, shifting rapidly, each taking the place of another to avoid the light and the gun. I shone it on them, and they fled the beam. Likewise, Detective Winters let them have a taste of his firearm as he shot a bullet into each one that got too close. Breathing rapidly and wide-eyed, we emerged to find the rest of the policemen had already departed. Only Detective Winters' car and Corey remained. I had expected some sort of rescue, as though getting out would mean safety. I looked at the object I had held. It was a skull. I turned back and stared into the darkness down there. Corey flitted to my shoulder and said into my ear, "They will come right out of that hole and snatch you back in if you get too close." Thanks, I nodded, my mouth hanging open as I stood in waves of terror. Part of my mind had not escaped. I needed to go back down there and get it real quick. It would only take 1 second. Hang on. Detective Winters curled over and threw up a bunch of thick, chunky bile onto a hapless banana slug. He reached down and used a leaf to flick it out of the vomit onto some nearby moss. Sorry about that. Must go now, Corey advised in urgent repetition. I went and got in the car and watched the horror hole with dreadful apprehension. I set the skull up in front of the passenger seat. Then I tried to learn how to breathe normally again. I noticed that Detective Winters' driver's side window was actually down. Eventually, Detective Winters had managed to light the smoke he had kept behind his ear that entire time. It was sagging with sweat, and he took a few unhappy puffs before he flicked it down into the hole. I prayed none of the folk would come flailing out and entangle him, kicking and screaming into the dark. We are lucky to be alive if that really happened. Detective Winters decided we both had merely freaked out in the dark down there as we drove away. He held up his dislocated thumb and added, "We couldn't die. Death will always happen," Corey objected. Detective Winters handed me his phone, and I put in the address. Then the GPS guided him to my old house as the sun went down. When we pulled up, she was waiting, her bags packed. She got into the car. "I'm coming with you," Isidore told me and Detective Winters. "I won't stay here alone. Oh, Lord, I've just got to say it. I just have to tell you." "Well, not right now. Maybe later." I looked out the window, away from her. In my mind, I could still see the outline of those creatures, the horrible flash of their bodies. My heart pounded in anxiety just thinking about them. I had always known of them, knew they existed. I had never, not even in my most dreaded nightmares, dreamed of meeting them. Your husband works with me. I am Detective Winters. Detective Winters introduced himself, again holding up his dislocated thumb. Isidore said nothing to him. She had her own ways. I am Corey. My crow spoke to her. She did not understand. He is so cute, Isidore told me. Then she wouldn't tolerate me looking away from her. She took my hand and placed it over her belly. I was very surprised to find out that so much time had passed already since I had left. I looked, and she was glowing as we drove under dappled streetlights. 9 months, I realized. I have wanted to tell you for so long, Isidore smiled.